Hi everyone, this is the Unit 3 and 4 video reviewing for the AP exam. Unit 3 and 4 go with the early modern era, which is the years 1450 to 1750. These years are unique in terms of world history because these units represent the first time that we have truly global interactions because of Europe exploring and colonizing the Americas and incorporating them into the existing networks of exchange. So sometimes they'll throw a multiple choice question on the AP exam about like, what makes this time period special? What makes this time period special? For this one, 1450 to 1750, it represents the first global interactions because of Europe incorporating the Americas into those existing trade routes. So that would be the thing that makes this time period special. I wanted to start with the bottom part of the review paper. You can find a copy of this review paper probably right underneath this video on Schoology. Unit 3 and 4 are assessed quite a bit on the AP exam. Unit 1 and 2 are assessed a little bit less than the others, but 3 and 4 could appear in more places on the AP exam. So I would say it will maybe be, 4 sets of stimuli questions in the multiple choice section. It could be the topic of an SAQ. It could potentially be the DBQ topic, and we have not had a DBQ over units 3 and 4 in a long time. Our most recent DBQs have been 1750 to the present. So could be the topic of a DBQ this year, which is 2025, 2026. And it could potentially be either question 1 or 2 on the LEQ. And actually, I think it's actually question 2 or 3, because on the AP exam, DBQ is question 1. Then the first LEQ is number 2, the second LEQ is labeled number 3, and the third is labeled number 4. So it actually could be question 2 or 3 on the LEQ. And here are some potential writing topics for Unit 3 and 4. Unit 3 focuses a lot on land-based empires, like the Gunpowder Empires, Tokugawa Japan, Ming Dynasty, maybe even a little bit of Europe at home in this time period. So the big skill for Unit 3 is comparison. College Board wants you to be able to compare and contrast ways that empires establish and maintain their state. Think like they construct monumental architecture. The leader controls the nobles. The leader uses religion to justify their rule. The leader comes up with new sources of revenue, like Zamindar tax money, like Mita system with the Incans, like the Ottoman Devshirme system, and the Millet system, collecting the jizya tax. Those are all like potential ways that land-based empires maintain and control their state. We did a whole practice LEQ on this topic on the big partner posters back in January. So if you want a refresher on this particular topic, you could always go on Schoology and look back at that file to see all of my potential arguments for a Unit 3 LEQ. The thing that I'm a little more concerned about is you getting a writing prompt asking you about challenges to state expansion in the early modern era. So that would be a prompt, asking you, and maybe even an SAQ, asking you to like name a resistance leader that resisted a land-based empire or even a maritime empire and their expansion. That would be like Shivaji resisting the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. That would be like Metacomb resisting the migration of the British settlers in North America. Tupac Amaru resisting Spanish settlement in the Incan parts of South America. That could be Queen Nanny resisting British expansion into Jamaica, or Ana Nzinga resisting Portuguese exploration or Portuguese expansion into present-day Angola. So that's the one I'm a little more concerned about. I could see it being an SAQ. So maybe like listen to some of the resistance people today in the notes and kind of review them on your own time. There could also be a topic or an LEQ topic about Columbian exchange. They've used that several times in an LEQ and once on a DBQ. So knowing impacts of Columbian exchange, how it affects Europeans versus Americans versus Africans, or just impact of global trade. Which again kind of ties into to Columbian exchange, how the global population increases thanks to new American food crops, but disease spreading affects Native Americans. Um, for Africans, they are going to be forcibly migrated to the Americas and live in horrendous conditions. That results in unequal gender balance back in Africa, things like that. There could also be an LEQ topic about causes of European exploration of the Americas. That's a whole topic in the binder, just reasons for European exploration. You would want to talk about Europeans wanting to find new access to trade routes because they've basically been cut off from trade with Asia because of the Byzantine Empire falling under control of the Ottoman Empire. You would want to talk about Europe gaining knowledge and technology from Asia after the Crusades and the Renaissance. So Europe is finally going to have bigger ships and they'll be able to build carracks and caravels. They'll be able to start making maps thanks to Prince Henry the Navigator. They'll get technology like compass, astrolabe, lateen sails, and then Europe is going to then develop the cross staff and back staff to help them even further with exploration. Um, you would also want to talk about knowledge of the winds, knowing about the wind patterns and wind currents in the Atlantic Ocean. And you would definitely, again, want to talk about Prince Henry the Navigator kind of setting the scene, helping get that early reconnaissance so that the knowledge can be like, disseminated across Portugal and Spain for the explorers and Italy for the explorers that are going to go explore. Lastly, there could be an LEQ prompt about continuity and change. From 1450 to 1750, there are new religions in this time period, specifically Protestant Christianity and Sikhism in South Asia. There's also religious conflict between the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid over Sunni Shia and over land. So there are some religious issues in this time period. There are some social issues in that there are new classes of elites. For example, in the casta system in Latin America, thanks to Spanish exploration and Portuguese exploration, there's a new social hierarchy with the Peninsulares and the Creoles at the top. In South Asia, the Zamindars have a high status. In East Asia, the Mandarins and the eunuchs have a high status. In the Ottoman Empire, the Janissaries have an elite status too. So there are new sets of elites in this time period. And there's also new labor systems, Mita system that the Spanish use and make coercive, encomienda system, indentured labor, which is primarily used by the English settlers in North America. And there's one more. I'm missing one more. Chattel slavery. Chattel slavery is the new labor system that made slavery way more coercive than it had before, where humans are seen as property now. So again, those are potential LEQ topics or even SAQ topics. I'm going to touch on some of that in the review, but you can, also, kind of review that stuff on your own. So let me scroll back up to the beginning. I can probably close that. Well, never mind. Okay, so let's start with Unit 3. So Unit 3 is land-based empires. The big question is, how do land-based empires establish and maintain their state? So here's a list of some example land-based empires. We have Ming and Qing dynasty in China. Ming is the one that replaces the Mongols or the Yuan dynasty. Ming means brilliant, and they're all about making China Chinese again, wanting to bring back the Confucian Civil Service exam. Use mandarins and eunuchs to help carry out imperial policy. Emperors are going to live in the Forbidden City, kind of away from the population. And eventually that's not going to be good for the Ming emperors because they'll start living lives of luxury, hold up in the Forbidden City, and not quite be in touch with the problems of the day. Remember, the Ming want to get rid of any evidence that the Mongols were in China. They want to return to traditional Chinese culture and government. For example, one of their emperors, Hongwu, is going to compile an encyclopedia that lists all the traditional Chinese government and culture. That's, again, that's kind of an indicator of the whole China, Chinese again thing. The Ming Dynasty is also going to sponsor the voyages of Zheng He. Zheng He was a Muslim eunuch. He was recruited to sail throughout the Indian Ocean, reestablishing Chinese superiority and diplomacy. This is not a trade venture. This is to reestablish China as a substantial world power, to show off their maritime technology, and to reestablish diplomatic ties with various states in the Indian Ocean, including Africa, India, and parts of Southeast Asia. The Qing dynasty is the dynasty that replaces the Ming. I think Qing dynasty is like 1664-ish, maybe. I don't think that's right. 16 something to 1911. Qing dynasty is going to be the last dynasty in China, and the Qing dynasty is led by the Manchu people from Manchuria. They are foreigners. They make the Chinese people wear the queue, but they do like Confucianism, so they're going to maintain the traditional Chinese government. Overall, Ming and Qing are very similar. Both have centralized Confucian governments, both value Chinese culture, maintain the spam hierarchy, both have some foot binding, both limit trade severely. The Ming and Qing dynasty are a change from previous Chinese dynasties because under Ming and Qing, the governments are more conservative. They've resisted innovation and they're not doing as much long distance trade because they don't really want foreigners in China. So that those two dynasties kind of make China unique in that they get away from the technology and the trade that China has previously engaged in. Okay, next one is Mughal Empire. Mughal is one of the gunpowder empires in South Asia. They're an Islamic empire. It's founded by Babur, who's a nomadic descendant of Tamerlane. Babur's son, Akbar, is the second major ruler. We have Emperor Aurangzeb as well. I think he's the sixth major ruler. Remember that Akbar was generally known to be religiously tolerant. He did not make the Hindus and the Sikhs pay the jizya tax. He had religious debates with missionaries, with people of other religions at his he had like a faith hall in one of his palaces. I forget the name of it, but he would invite people from all around to discuss religion. Whereas Aurangzeb, on the other hand, around the 1700s, is known as being more religiously intolerant. He reinstated the jizya tax. He shut down some Hindu temples. So that's the difference between the two. Under the Mughal Empire, agriculture is important, and the zamindars are the new elite tax collectors that go out and collect tax money from those growing food. In the Mughal Empire, there is a new religion, Sikhism. College Board considers it to be syncretic and blending elements of Hinduism with Islam. So if you get an SAQ asking you for an example of syncretism in 1450 to 1750, you could use Sikhism as an example, and you just need to say it's a new religion in South Asia. You could say it's formed by Guru Nanak, and it blends parts of Hinduism with the monotheistic element in Islam, and that would be enough to get you the point. The Mughal Empire is going to fall around the time that the British East India Company starts to come into India. The East India Company kind of gets there early 1700s and spends the rest of the 1700s increasing their power on the coast. Then in the 1800s, they expand their influence even more. And by 1857, the Sepoy Rebellion happens and the Mughal Empire is officially over and India is made into a British colony. Okay, next one is Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire is the second Islamic gunpowder empire. Remember that the three gunpowder empires, Mughal, Ottoman, Safavid, they all use European gunpowder technology like cannons to expand their borders. In the past, there has been multiple questions on the AP exam over different years with pictures of Islamic troops with cannons, people conquering land, and you had to connect the fact that these are gunpowder empires, they're Islamic empires that use the gunpowder cannons to expand their borders. Okay, so Ottoman is an example of that, a gunpowder empire. Starts when, or gets the start that we think of as the start with 1453 with Mehmet the Conqueror conquering Constantinople with the big cannons. The Ottoman Empire is replacing the previous like Christian Byzantine Empire. And the Ottoman Empire is going to last until 1918, until World War I. They have rule under Mehmet the Conqueror, who conquers Constantinople. Then the Ottoman Empire expands into Eastern Europe and a bit of North Africa under Suleiman the Magnificent. They use the Devshirme system to recruit boys to be trained as either government workers or janissaries to serve in the military, helping to expand the borders. As they expand to new places, they conquer more Christian or Jewish kingdoms, enslave some of the children there, and train them. So the Devshirme system helps to make the state stronger and helps to support their expansion. Again, they use janissaries, these elite soldiers in the military, and they use the millet system too. So Christian and Jewish states that are conquered pay the jizya tax in exchange for getting to practice their religion freely. The Ottomans also have a major rivalry with the Safavids. Remember that Ottomans are Sunni, Safavids are Shia. So the Ottoman-Safavid rivalry, they're competing over land and religion. There have been questions on the test before about the Ottomans being Sunni and something that kind of like, I don't know the right way to word it, but like something that strengthens their like Sunni legitimacy over their kingdom is the fact that they rival the Safavids. Like they use that juxtaposition as a way to differentiate themselves. So always keep that in mind if you get an Ottoman multiple choice question and there's something religion in it, make sure to remember that they compete with the Safavids over religion. Safavids are in Persia. They practice Shia Islam. It starts with Twelver Shiism under Shah Ismail. It replaces Tamerlane's empire, and again, they're in constant conflict with the Ottomans. At some point, the Safavids do trade with Europeans, so they might have contact with some European merchants. That could pop up on the exam, but I want to say the biggest thing with Safavid is that they have a rivalry with the Ottomans. Next, I have how do empires expand? They expand through military conquest, gunpowder weapons like cannons, arm trade. Conflicts, again, Ottomans and Safavids conflict over land and religion, especially in the 1600s. It typically results in Ottoman expansion because usually the Ottomans win. The Safavids will later reconquer the land they took, the land that the Ottomans took under Shah Abbas the Great. But ultimately, by the end of the time period, the Ottomans have kind of established their superiority over the Safavids because the Safavids collapse in like 1722. Next bullet is how are empires administered. I'll scroll down a bit. Okay. One, they use bureaucracies and military elites. Excuse me. The bureaucrats in England are the justices of the peace. They are local gentry who have been selected by the kings of England to help carry out justice in the local areas. The daimyo are the nobles in Japan. Remember, they have the alternate attendance policy where they have to live at the Edo capital every other year, so the shogun can keep eyes on them. That could be lumped in with an argument about the leaders curb the power of the nobles. The alternate attendance policy does that. Ottoman Devshirme system, the janissaries are the new elites. Tokugawa Japan, they also have salaried samurai as elites. Under Ivan the Terrible in Russia, the Oprichnina or the secret police system is used to monitor the nobles. The Chinese civil service exam in Ming and Qing dynasty is a way to carry out government policies. They're used in the bureaucracy. You could talk, okay, I have zamindars with revenue. Next one is religion. So, divine right of kings theory. In Europe, most leaders use religion to legitimize their rule. Kings of England, kings of France, like Louis XIV, all claim divine right to rule their state. Again, Louis XIV, Louis XIV. In the Mexica or the Aztec people, this would be like 1450 to 500 before the Spanish get there. They use human sacrifice as a religious tool to increase their power and to dominate over neighboring states. Remember, they have that tributary system. Kingdoms in West Africa, like Songhai, are going to use Islam to legitimize the rule. For example, there's a leader, Askia the Great, Askia, revives Islam, makes it the official religion in his West African state, goes on Hajj like Mansa Musa. Next is monumental architecture. Monumental architecture is constructed to show off the emperor's power. The Qing dynasty makes giant imperial portraits to show off the power of the leader. Europe builds palaces like Versailles. Mughal Empire has Taj Mahal mausoleum built by Shah Jahan. Ottomans have Topkapi Palace, Suleiman Mosque. Those buildings are gonna house the harem for the emperor's family. We've talked about that, or the sultan's family. And generating revenue. That one is important. Coming up with new sources of money, like the zamindars collecting tax money in the Mughal Empire, the jizya tax being collected in the Gunpowder Empires, collecting tribute, like China collects tribute from its neighboring states and from nomads. The Mexica or the Aztec people collect tribute from their neighboring states as well. The Ming Dynasty collects taxes in silver. Remember, we talked about the silver trade and the Spanish, like trading silver to get porcelain and tea and stuff from China. So Ming Dynasty collects hard money taxes in silver. That's an example of generating new revenue. Okay, next is how do belief systems impact empires? First one is Protestant Reformation. That's a movement in the early 1500s led by Martin Luther. It produces new Protestant sects of Christianity like Lutheranism, Calvinism, Anglicanism. That's going to lead to the Catholic Church losing followers, hence why so many Spanish and Portuguese priests go to the Americas to establish Jesuit missions there and convert people to Catholicism so you can find new, markets of people to make into Christian. As a result of Protestant Reformation, the Catholics start the Jesuit missionary group. The Jesuits are elite and educated. Their job is to go around the world converting people to Christianity. There's also some political conflict in Europe because of the Protestant Reformation. The English are Protestant. The Spanish are Catholic. Sometimes they fight over religion. The Netherlands became independent from Spain because they converted to Protestantism, and Spain is Catholic. So sometimes there are fights over religion, political fights over religion in Europe. The other one, oh, sorry, one more thing for Protestant Reformation. The Spanish control their nobles by using the Spanish Inquisition to scare the nobles from becoming Protestant. So that could be, that could go up with how our empire is administered. It could be an example of leaders curbing the nobles. Rivalry between the Ottoman and Safavid, we've talked about that already. It intensifies the split within Islam. And development of Sikhism. Sikhism is one of the two new religions in this time period. Develops in the 1500s by Guru Nanak. It develops from Hinduism and is influenced by the Sufi mysticism in Islam. So there is a monotheistic idea in Sikhism, but there are some of those Hindu values in nonviolence, and they recognize the right of other faiths to practice their religion. Okay, so that's Unit 3, Topic-wise, it's short. There's only 4 topics, but it's a good unit to review because we covered it back in January, so it's been a while. I would spend some time looking through this unit. Okay, now we're going to go to Unit 4. Unit 4 is transoceanic interconnections, Europe exploring the Americas. First thing is technological innovations that support exploration. We have the caravel, the carrack, the Dutch flute, which allows you to ship products or carry cargo at double the cargo, but half the price because the ship is more efficient. It requires less crew members. Caravel is going to be the smaller ship used for reconnaissance, whereas carrack is the larger ship that carries cargo. Lateen sail, compass, all of that knowledge is going to come from the Eastern world thanks to Renaissance and Crusades. Information is coming into Europe, and Europeans, especially the Portuguese, will then develop the cross staff and the back staff based on that technology to help them navigate the Atlantic. So that's a big thing. Interaction between Europe and the Islamic world helps to produce Europe exploration. Prince Henry the Navigator is one of the early explorers exploring and mapping the West African coast. We say that he sets up a school. I don't know if it's really a school, but he like preserves his maritime knowledge and exploration knowledge so that future explorers have a basis for exploring the Atlantic and getting to the Americas. Next one, causes and events associated with exploration. So one reason Europeans might want to explore is to find new trade routes to Asia, especially because the Ottomans have conquered the Byzantine Empire and have cut Europe off from trade with the East overland. Dutch, English, and French want to find that Northwest Passage to get across North America to get a faster route to Asia. They might also want to explore and colonize to spread Christianity because they want to find new political allies given recent crusades. Plus, Catholics want to find a new group of people to convert to Catholicism given the Protestant Reformation back at home. Portugal establishes a global trading post empire in the Indian Ocean in the 1500s. Oh, I didn't say another thing that supports exploration, knowledge of the winds, the Volta de Mar, knowing about the wind patterns and the ocean currents. That's really important too. With Portugal as the first to kind of explore and colonize, they set up their trading post empire in the Indian Ocean in the 1500s. And that's going to stimulate European interest in transoceanic travel and trade since the Portuguese are the first to get to India through water route. So Spain is going to start sponsoring explorers to try to catch up. They sponsor Christopher Columbus, inadvertently stumbles upon the Americas, and that leads to Spain colonizing much of Meso and Southern America. Columbian exchange. So they want you to know about the exchange of food, people, diseases, ideas. We know that the Columbian exchange has the unintended consequence of spreading disease vectors like smallpox to the Native Americans. Remember that the natives didn't have domesticated animals, so they didn't have some of these viruses that jumped from the animal population to the human population. They have no immunity to smallpox, so they're going to die in large numbers. Leads to an increase in demand of slavery because with so much of the native population having died from diseases, Europeans then start using chattel slavery with enslaved African labor because they have been exposed to the smallpox. They're not going to die in large quantities from it. Of course, those enslaved Africans are going to be brought to the Caribbean and Brazil to use their forced labor on sugar plantations and other like fruit plantations or in those Caribbean areas with the tropical climate. The spread of food crops from the Americas to Europe is going to support a population increase because Americans have a more wide variety of crops. They have the corn to feed livestock. They have potatoes which are calorically dense and can help increase populations in Europe, especially Ireland. Sweet potatoes, manioc, which grows really well in Africa. Whereas it's the old world animals, the horses, pigs, cattle that are brought to the Americas and help with transportation and help with farming labor. Because of the spread of enslaved Africans to the Americas, we're also going to have some syncretism in ideas and religion. I think we talk about that on the back. I think that's somewhere on the back, but that could be a consequence of Columbian exchange too. Okay. Next is maritime empires established. The Portuguese have that trading post empire in the 1500s in the Indian Ocean. Trading post empire means they control different colonies, or they control different port cities on the coast, like Goa in India. They don't really try to conquer land in Asia. They're just like setting up a trading post in a trading city to tax trade, and they use those safe conduct passes to collect money from trade. Alfonso of Albuquerque is the big military guy. He's using military to control trade in the Indian Ocean. Whereas in the Americas, the Portuguese are going to have a colony in Brazil with the sugarcane plantations. They use enslaved African labor because the Portuguese have colonies in Angola. They've threatened the Asante and the Congo tribes. And Ana Nzinga is going to resist Portuguese colonization there. Okay, Spanish Empire. The Spanish are going to conquer the Aztecs and Incas in the early 1500s because they had disease that weakened the natives. They pit the different Mexica states against each other. They had superior weapons, the metal weapons. 'Cause remember, Americas don't have metallurgy. The Spanish did this with a small population. They didn't have a lot of soldiers with them, but their conquistadors were able to defeat the Aztecs because of disease, help from different Mexica groups, and the metal weapons. Sorry, I wrote something and I'm not sure where it goes. I don't quite remember. Okay, French. Okay. The French sailed to find the Northwest Passage. They're going to set up colonies in Canada along the Mississippi River, parts of the Caribbean, like Haiti, where they'll have a big sugar plantation. The French are going to set up their colonies in the 1600s, which is after the Spanish and the Portuguese, which were more 1500s. So French and British are a little bit after. British also are going to set up their colony in the 1600s. They have some islands in the Caribbean, like Jamaica. They have the 13 colonies. After the 1700s, they'll have South Asia as well. And the reason why the French and the British are setting up their colonies is to find the Northwest Passage, but mercantilism really keeps the colonies going, because those colonies are going to provide the mother country with resources and money. They're going to provide a market of people to sell stuff to as well. Mercantilism is kind of the whole economic idea in this time period, that countries in Europe want to set up colonies to make money from those colonies. The Dutch are going to control land in Indonesia, which they call the Spice Islands. They have their Dutch VOC joint stock company that helps them do this. Remember that the Dutch have a republican form of government. Their people get to vote and make laws instead of having a divine right to rule monarch. So their people can vote for laws that promote economic activity, since that's how their people make money. New economic and labor systems. Again, this is all tied to mercantilism. The Spanish exploit the Incan Mita system to force the natives in South America to work in the mines, mining silver. The encomienda system is used by the Spanish to force Native Americans in their Mesoamerican colony to grow food on the hacienda, farming or ranching. Slavery is intensified, and the use of chattel slavery is used to replace native labor. Chattel slavery is used in Caribbean islands and Brazil to grow sugar on sugar plantations in horrid conditions. There are some domestic servants that enslaved Africans are made into. They are going to be domestic servants in the Mediterranean and in the Middle East. So, for example, in the East African city-states, the Swahili city-states, some of the enslaved Africans will be forcibly brought to the Middle East to be domestic servants in people's households. Okay, the English are going to use indentured labor in their English colonies, but they'll run out of indentured servants eventually, and they'll start using chattel slavery instead. Remember, that leads to some changes in Africa because there's fewer men there. That will lead to some polygyny in Africa, where men are taking multiple wives because there's not enough men for all of the women there. And it'll lead to some syncretism in the Americas. And I think I have some examples in a moment. Okay, maritime empires maintained and develop economic strategies to consolidate and maintain power. Mercantilism, joint stock companies sometimes administer empires. In the British and the French colonies, it's usually joint stock companies that set up a colony and kind of run that colony with the permission of the monarch. Sometimes conflicts emerge between different maritime states, like Europeans, like the Portuguese, sometimes rival Islamic states in the Indian Ocean, like the Omani merchants. Sometimes they conflict with the Portuguese. Sometimes the Portuguese conflict with the Safavids, although sometimes they get along. But there are rivalries between European explorers in the Indian Ocean and the people who live in the Muslim states in the Indian Ocean. New trading networks produce exchange. We have the Atlantic system with triangular trade. Y'all know about that. European monopolies monopolize trade, like the VOC has a monopoly on spices with Indonesia, or the British East India Company has a monopoly on tea and trade with India. Spain mined silver in their colonies, and they used that silver to buy Chinese commodities like porcelain, silk, and tea. Back at home in Europe, peasant labor does continue. Western Europeans might have their peasants raise sheep for the wool, whereas in India, they're still growing cotton. China, they're still making silk at this time because industrialization hasn't happened yet. Impacts on society, the chattel slavery leads to polygyny in Africa, where men have multiple wives because there's not enough men for all the women. Leads to more fighting within Africa too, because different tribes might fight over enslaved people because they have relations with the Portuguese and they'll trade people to be enslaved with the Portuguese to get guns and other finished products. Syncretism emerges in the Americas. We have the syncretic religions, Vodun in Haiti, Candomblé in Brazil, and Santeria in Cuba. All of those religious beliefs are going to blend elements of African Bantu religions with Catholicism or Christianity because they've been forcibly brought to the Americas through the Atlantic system. So they'll take their existing beliefs and mix them with some of the Catholic beliefs. Again, that's Voodoo, Candomblé, and Santeria. Role of belief systems, there's more syncretism. Think Virgin of Guadalupe too. That shows some syncretism or blending between the native practices and the Christian missions, the Catholic missions. Okay, next we have internal and external challenges to state power. I would be concerned about having an LEQ on this because I don't know if people would remember any of these things, but here are some people that resist state expansion. We have Shivaji. He is a Hindu leader of the Maratha people in the Rajput area. They resist Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. That is an example of a successful Hindu resistance against an Islamic state expansion in like the 1700s-ish. Ana Nzinga is a leader of the Ndongo and the Matamba people. She successfully resists Portuguese expansion in her time. The Portuguese would raid slaves from the Ndongo and neighboring tribes, despite Ana Nzinga trying to use diplomacy to stop that. She used help from the Dutch to resist the Portuguese expansion, and she was successful in her time, but long-term, the Portuguese still take over the area and colonize Angola and keep that colony through the Berlin Conference and all the way up until like 1975. Metacomb is a Native American in North America. He tries to resist English expansion into North America in the 1600s. He is unsuccessful and he dies. The Native Americans couldn't overcome the metal weapons, the guns, and the smallpox. Maroon societies resist slavery and expansion in the Caribbean and Brazil. For example, Queen Nanny in Jamaica resists British settlement of Jamaica. Queen Nanny had a base in the mountains, and they used the mountains as their safe haven for the Maroon communities, and they would go and attack the English settlers. Remember that there's a man, Yemilian Pugachev, in Russia. He gets the Cossacks together and resists serfdom against Catherine the Great and her imperial expansion. He's unsuccessful. He gets drawn and quartered. And enslaved people resist slavery in North America. In colonial society, in the 1700s, there's a big slave revolt called the Stono Rebellion. It's not going to be successful. And that Stono Rebellion is going to result in harsher laws passed to limit slave activity, like prevent them from reading, prevent them from moving off the plantation too much, preventing them from being able to purchase their freedom. Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass are associated with this resistance, but they're from the next time period. So I don't know if they'd really count for an essay for this time period. And then we have new social hierarchies, Casta system in New Spain, Jews being expelled from Spain because of Reconquista, Chinese wearing the queue to show their loyalty and submission to the Ming dynasty, or sorry, the Qing dynasty, the Manchu people. We have European noble elites in Europe, Russian boyars, Japanese daimyo. So there's new types of elites in society around the world. So you'd want to know new hierarchy, Casta system, and examples of new elites. Okay, so that's 3 and 4. I would say for unit 3 and 4, please look up some writing practice on the at-home study plan at home. I do think this is going to be a topic heavily assessed this year because again, there hasn't been a DBQ over these topics in a long time. So I would prepare to do at least one writing on unit 3 and 4 to be ready for the AP exam. Thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, just let me know.